Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man the same murder three? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Back in 1776, someone said, "Give me coffee or give me death." And if that's how you feel, you should be at the Organic Man Coffee Truck. They make coffee the right way, one delicious cup at a time. 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. Coffee, the stuff dreams are made of. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. I have to thank John Rohan for tonight's show. He sent me a link to check out, and the next thing I knew, I was reading dozens of reports on Prince Edward Island and the surrounding area. Prince Edward Island sits just off the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada. For those of you that don't know, Nova Scotia means New Scotland. The most famous location in Nova Scotia is Oak Island, home of the Money Pit. I can hardly wait for this season to begin. I watch The Curse of Oak Island any time it's on. I am an acorn, for sure. Prince Edward Island is considerably larger and is known for a ghost ship. Not just any ghost ship, but a flaming ghost ship. Since 1786, people have been reporting sightings of a schooner on Northumberland Strait. The ship has flames leaping from the masts and the sails. The witnesses are usually unsure whether the ship has 3 or 4 masts, but they all agree that the ship is a schooner and it's on fire. A schooner is a sailing ship with 2 or more masts, and the sails are set front to back instead of side to side. The sails are either triangular or trapezoids, or a mix of both. Spotting a sailing ship in the waters off Nova Scotia wasn't so odd back in the 18th and 19th centuries. Seeing a ship on fire was not common, but it was something you might see. Wooden ships with canvas sails were an accident waiting to happen. The combination of a lack of firefighting equipment on board made fire a constant worry, and products used to keep the salt water from eating away at the vessel also made it highly flammable. Seeing a sailing ship encased in flames left the witness with hardly any solutions. Contact the harbor authorities or Coast Guard and then watch as the ship went down. You could begin patrolling the beach, searching for survivors, but that was about it. The first documented sighting was 1786. It occurred at the Sea Cow Head Lighthouse on the west side of Newfoundland. The keeper saw a 3-masted schooner, sails full and swollen by the winds of a northeastern gale. As the ship came closer and closer to the treacherous rocks at the base of the cliff, the keeper tried everything to warn the ship of the rocks. Just as it seemed utterly hopeless, the ship turned into the storm and was lost to sight in the rain and the squall. The keeper figured the ship was lost in the storm. He later searched in vain to find out what had become of the schooner. He checked with every port and was never able to find out if the ship even existed. There were no records of a schooner en route to or coming from any port that was in the vicinity of the lighthouse on the date in question. The report didn't say anything about fire being seen on the ship, but the bizarre sighting, followed by no record anywhere of the schooner, made folks connect the 2 stories. In early 1900s, a group of sailors spotted a schooner near Charlottetown. They all said the ship was on fire. They could see men on board climbing the rigging to escape the flames. The sailors sent word to the authorities and then launched rowboats to see about a rescue. As the rescue party was approaching the burning vessel, it vanished from sight. Thinking it must have sunk, the sailors continued on to the last position, but they could find no evidence of a ship having sunk there. Wood and debris would have been everywhere. There were all kinds of things on ships that would float. The rescuers found in 1950s, Captain Angus Brown of Wood Island talked about how he and a crew had taken the ferry to Prince Nova out from Wood Island one night to help a ship that appeared to be burning. Wood Island is near the far southern end of Prince Edward Island. As they approached the stricken vessel, it suddenly vanished. They searched the shore for any debris, but found nothing. The report was written off as being misidentification of unknown origin. That same night, a husband and wife were getting ready for bed. The wife glanced out the window and thought she saw a light in one of the neighbors' houses. She then realized there were no houses in the direction where the light was coming from. She told her husband to come have a look. They stood there and watched as the light grew closer. Intrigued by this mystery light, the couple went outside for a better look. The light was moving towards their home. Soon they could see that it was actually coming from a ship. The rigging was on fire, and there was what they could see in the dark had been flames. A ship with triangular sails was passing by the middle of Northumberland Strait. Having heard the stories from others about seeing a ghost ship on fire in the vicinity, the couple simply watched as the ship went by. It passed from view after several minutes, never showing any indication of sinking. They could see no crew anywhere on board the boat. Local fishermen have been seeing this burning ship along the coast for years. The men who did try to get closer to the burning vessel have all said that no matter how hard they tried to get closer for a better look at the ship, it always stayed just too far away. It looked as if the ship was intentionally sailing away from any witnesses. Back in the fall of 1973, Marvin McLeod was coming home from Murray Harbor. He was driving along the shore road around 12:30 in the morning. The night was cold and it was very clear. It was hunting season, so he had a set of binoculars in the car with him. Out the window, Marvin spotted a burning schooner out in the bay. He grabbed the binoculars and had a closer look. He could see men running back and forth on the deck, trying to extinguish the flames. He saw others jumping overboard. Thinking there was a real emergency, Marvin began driving real fast so he could get home and call the Coast Guard. There were no cell phones yet. The ship vanished as soon as he got going. It didn't sink because he had kept the schooner in view as he was driving. It just blinked out like somebody had turned off a light switch. October 1978, the lighthouse keeper at Wood Island, Leon Patton, received a phone call from Bernice Smith, a lady who lived up the road. As she asked him, "What are you burning?" He replied, "I'm not burning anything." Well, she told him that there was something burning to the east side of the lighthouse. When he looked out to the east, he could see the phantom ship heading down the strait towards Murray Harbor. He said it was definitely a schooner, and it was ablaze. As he watched, the vessel just vanished into thin air. A man vacationing on Prince Edward Island He was staying with his grandparents in a hotel near the shore. One night at around 10 or 11, he spotted a ship on the horizon. It had all the sails set, and it was moving fast through the water. The witness loved ships, and he ran to grab a set of binoculars so he could get a better look. As he watched the ship cut through the waves, it occurred to him there was no wind blowing. The ship looked as if it was running ahead of a storm. His grandfather joined him on the deck, and they watched as the ship came closer. It was a 3-masted schooner. They would pass the binoculars back and forth, discussing how it looked and why the sails were full when the wind was calm. As the ship came closer, they could see a glow near the base of the masts. The glow soon became flames. The fire was leaping up the masts towards the bottoms of the sails. As they watched, the ship became engulfed in flame as it passed the two witnesses. This was when the grandfather realized they were witnessing the legend he had heard about while serving in the Royal Navy. The ship passed by, and it was spotted by other guests staying in the hotel. The folks staying there all came out to watch as the flaming ghost ship went by. When one of the guests said they should contact the Coast Guard, the grandfather told him the ship was seen every year about the same time. A few folks did decide to call the RCMP anyway and report there's a ship in distress. Not surprisingly, the authorities never showed up. After watching the ghost ship for about 45 minutes, they saw it slowly sink beneath the waves. It didn't stop or even slow down. It just went under as if sailing over the horizon, kind of like how a submarine would submerge. In January 1988, a burning ship was spotted just off Borden from the ferry. The ship's radar was directed at the burning ship. It didn't show up on radar. The ferry changed direction in order to lend a hand, only to no longer be able to see any ship in the area. Once more, those who knew wrote it off as being the ghost ship. In 2008, a teenager in Tatamouche, a small town south of Prince Edward Island, saw a ship passing through the strait. He described it as being white and gold. It had 3 masts, and all the sails were set. As he watched, it looked as if the ship had suddenly begun to burn, and the crew could be seen running around the deck trying to either put out the fire or abandon ship. Some people will say the flaming ship is nothing more than St. Elmo's fire. St. Elmo's fire is a weather phenomenon in which luminous plasma is created by a corona discharge from a sharp or pointed object in the strong electrical field in the atmosphere, such as what is generated by a thunderstorm or created by volcanic eruption. St. Elmo's fire is named after Saint Erasmus of Formia, also known as Saint Elmo, one of the 2 Italian saints named after the country. He is also the patron saint of sailors. If the whole story was just folks seeing St. Elmo's fire, then why is it the same ship every time? People don't report seeing a one-master or a motorboat with flames leaping into the sky. They don't report a square rigger. They always report a multi-masted schooner with men on the deck sometimes, and the ship is always under full sail even when the wind is not blowing. Take a brief pause to maybe drum up a little business for some of my friends and relatives. If you can't see what you're looking at, swing by the Optica del Norte at 107 Calle del Norte and get your eyes checked. You should be able to see what you're looking at. If you're hungry, The 1755 barbecue at the Frontera Beer Gardens on San Bernardo is the place to get what you need. They have some of the best hamburgers in the planet. Try the LPRS burger. He's open from Tuesday to Saturday from 11 to 2 and 6 to 11. Don't forget to contact Lourdes James if you need skincare products. You can reach her at 956-723-3019. If you hear a bump in the night and you think you might have a ghost visiting, contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society. You can get a hold of them at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. Roland H. Sherwood wrote a book called Story Parade. In it, he set forth some of the ideas on the beginnings of the Prince Edward ghost ship. The book came out in 1948, but it's still in print and you can find it in some places. He says there might have been a ship filled with religious folks heading for Nova Scotia. They ran afoul of a bunch of pirates who dispatched them by setting the ship on fire. Another story goes the ship was a pleasure craft that had set sail with a full crew. At some point in the village, the crew got drunk, and during a fight, somebody overturned a kerosene lamp, which set the ship on fire. Some say the ghost ship is a phantom of a ship filled with immigrants heading for parts unknown. As the ship was nearing Nova Scotia, the main mast was hit by lightning. The mast burned down to the deck and all aboard perished. Then there's the idea the ship was coming from Europe filled with cargo. As they were passing Prince Edward Island, a lamp was dropped, causing the flames to lick up the main mast and then jump to the others. The ship's crew jumped overboard, but were never found in the rough seas. West of Caracat, at the head of the Baie Chaleur, the fire ship has been linked with the Marquis de Mallouz, a French frigate driven into the Restigou River and sunk by the British in 1760. The ship was salvaged by Capuchin monks who have a monastery on the Indian reservation at Cross Point, Quebec. After laying on the bottom for 179 years, her hull was salvaged, timber by timber, by the Capuchin monks, who, with the aid of a sea captain, eventually managed to fit all the pieces back together. The story sounds good, but there is no reason to believe the fire ship is related to the Marquis de Mallouz. Placentia Bay sits 550 miles east of Prince Edward Island off the coast of Newfoundland. The ghost ship, or one nearly the same, has been seen in the bay. People report seeing a ship once more under full sail, even when the air was calm. The ship is seen with flames leaping up along the masts or along the rigging. Anyone trying to get closer to the ghost ship will find their efforts are useless. As they pursue the ship, it will always seem to be about the same distance regardless of how fast the would-be rescuers motor after it. The ship might be visible for half hour or more, never close enough to get a look at the name. I keep hearing my cat making weird noises under the desk. I was wondering what that sound was, and, well, I guess she's snoring. Weird activity for cats. I remember one night listening to Art Bell, way back, and he had one of his cats had gotten under his desk, and, well, I guess it pulled on a wire or chewed through the wire or something, and, well, suddenly you were hearing all kinds of crackling and static and noise over the radio. So from that moment on, he would always keep his cats locked out of the studio whenever he was broadcasting. Well, the cats didn't much care for that, so they would sit outside his door and make all kinds of noise. I think they made more noise outside than they ever did in, but, well, that's cats for you. In Chaleur Bay, 350 miles north-northeast of Prince Edward Island, they also have seen the flaming ghost ship. Once again, the witnesses will report seeing a schooner sailing along the shoreline. They will say the ship was passing by and burst into flames, or the ship was on fire the entire time they could see it. Seeing a schooner burning with its sails is one of the most often seen unexplained things in the waters around Nova Scotia. There are other reports that sound similar, but they have different parts involved. One report involves a boat full of men rowing along the coast. All of them are naked and on fire. The witness was struck by the fact that none of the men seemed concerned by the flames burning up around them. They were all busy pulling on their oars and making way through the waves. Naked and on Fire sounds like either a song or a B-movie. There's something from MST3K. There's another report about a pirate dory that visits an island in the Straits of Belle Island every year on June 25th. A dory is a small, shallow draft boat about 16 to 23 feet long. It's usually a lightweight boat with high sides and a flat bottom and a very sharp bow. They can be propelled by oar or sail. Belle Island is located in the Conception Bay in east end of Newfoundland. Nothing is on fire, but the connection has been made between the dory and the flaming schooner by many witnesses. In movies, the pirates are always seen attacking merchant ships in huge square riggers crewed by hundreds of men. Most pirates used sloops or schooners, small ships that could sail faster than the average merchant. They also had a shallow draft and they could be operated by a much smaller crew. Smaller the crew, the bigger the cut of the spoils each man would receive. If you've got a crew of 100 men, then you're going to get 1/100th of the take. If you've got a crew of 25 men, well, you're going to get a heck of a lot more money. They liked small crews and small ships. Late at night on June 25th of every year, people would spot a small boat being rowed over to Belle Island. There would be 8 to 10 men all dressed in what folks assumed was pirate gear. Well, pirates wore the same clothes as just about everybody living at the time. The boat would put in on the island, but they would never see it again. Stories began to circulate about there being a pirate treasure buried on the island. People would row out to the island and look around, but they never managed to find anything. One group of treasure hunters decided the thing to do was row out to the island on the evening of June 25th, and then wait for the dory full of pirates to come ashore. The treasure hunters would then follow the buccaneers and see where the gold was being hidden. Once the pirates had left, the men would dig up the loot and retire in comfort. Hopefully. The 3 men rowed out to Belle Island just before sundown. They waited in the brush for the pirates to appear. The next morning, only 2 of the treasure hunters returned to port. They were in a state of panic. They said that the pirates came ashore after sunset. The 2 men were unsure how, but the pirates seemed to know they were being observed. Instead of digging a hole for their gold, the pirates attacked the 3 men hidden in the brush. One of the 3 was killed. The 2 witnesses that had managed to get away died a few months later under very mysterious conditions. There's a second version of the same story being told. 3 men had gone out looking for buried treasure near Petty Harbor. They found what they thought might be the right spot, and they began digging. As they were all in the trench they had created, the men spotted the light of a ship on the horizon. Looking at the oncoming vessel closely, the men began to think this just might be the pirates coming back for their treasure. The men watched the ship as it got closer, and soon they realized the schooner was a ghost ship. The crew on board the ghost ship lowered a skiff, and the men clomb down to the small boat. As the rowboat began to make their way towards the shore, two of the men sprinted from their trench. They ran to the far end of the island and hid. After hiding out for a few hours, the men thought it was safe to go back and try to find their friend who they were hoping had run with them. They got to where the trench was. His body was laying on the ground. Someone had filled the trench back in with dirt. As the sun was coming up, the two remaining men headed back to their home port. Once there, they told their story of what had taken place out in the harbor. Some folks thought these two men had killed their partner. Others believed the story. Ghost ships had been seen in the area for years, and this just added to the mystery of the sea. Shortly after their return, the two would-be treasure hunters vanished without a trace. It is believed they also were taken by the ghost pirates. Caraquet is a fishing village just north of Prince Edward Island. About 4,000 people call the place home. Just about every one of them, fishermen or those working in the fish canning factory, have seen the flaming ghost schooner. The general manager of the fish packing plant was new to the area. He had come from Gloucester to run the plant. Late one night he spotted a schooner on the horizon. As it approached, the ship appeared to burst into flames. He quickly called the RCMP to report the ship in distress. The Mountie that answered the phone listened to the manager's report and then said, "Don't worry, it's just the ghost ship." He said if the manager didn't believe in ghosts, then it was just an apparition. The Mountie assured the manager that the fire ship was a regular sighting to the area. Lester Marks, the keeper of the Mescal lighthouse, told about how he and another man were fishing when they saw a light in the sky. It looked like someone holding a lantern up in the crow's nest of a ship. The light looked very odd through the fog. The two men watched the light most of the night. It never moved from the spot where it first appeared. The two continued fishing, but they kept looking at the light, wondering what it could be. As the sun was coming up the next morning, the lantern faded away. Lester is convinced that they'd seen the light from the ghost ship, even though there was no fire involved. Miss Mary Allard of Pocamooch, just south of Caraquet, was a photographer back in the 19th century, when you had to use a tripod and you could only take one photo at a time. She made it her life's work to try getting a photo of the fire ship. Although she did see the ship on many occasions, she was never able to get it close enough to take a photograph. Now, this was long before zoom lenses. To this day, no one has been able to photograph the fire ship. Many have tried, but none ever succeed. Either the picture doesn't come out, the camera doesn't work, or all you get is a glow on the water. The flaming ghost ship has been seen by so many people living along the coast of New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island that the Canadian government issued a stamp of the ship. A group of stamps were released in June 13th, 2014, on the subject of Haunted Canada. They depicted the ghosts of Fort George, the ghost of the former French governor Louis de Baude, which is said to haunt the Formant-le-Château Frenetic Hotel. There's the burning ship of Northumberland Strait, almost said Newfoundland, the burning ship of Northumberland Strait, the ghost train of St. Louis, Saskatchewan, the ghost bride of the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, who is said to have fallen downstairs to her death when she caught the heel of her shoe in the train of her wedding gown. People today say they have seen her dancing to a waltz in the ballroom late at night. There's one stamp of the phantom bell ringers, but we'll get to them in a bit. East of Caracat, at the mouth of Bay Cholere, the fire ship is called the John Craig. That was the name of a bark which sank off Shippagan Island around 1800. All hands drowned except for a cabin boy who managed to reach the shore, but he later died of exhaustion. The ship was called a bark, which is practically a schooner, except for the foremast has square sails with triangular sails on all of the rest. Malignant Cove is a small community located in Antigonish County, Nova Scotia. The county is south from St. George Bay, southeast of Prince Edward Island. It was named for the sailing vessel Malignant, which ran aground there sometime during the American Revolution. There's a variety of sunken or missing vessels all over the years, having been credited with the Phantom Ship, but many growing up in Malignant Cove, the ship is believed to be the ghostly remains of the pirate ship Malignant. Remnants of the ship are believed to still be visible today during a nor'easter storm when the tide goes way down low. Prior to the arrival of Scottish settlers, the area was Micmac territory. No white man had been there until the pirate ship Malignant entered the cove in order to escape a British warship. Well, no white man with the exception of Henry Sinclair and his group, but that's another story. It is not clear if the ship ran aground or was scuttled by the pirate captain to ensure the British would not take his riches. Some have actually seen the ghost ship navigating the cove, its sails and masts in flames. This sounds exactly like the Prince Edward sightings. Micmac legend told of the sighting known as the fire upon the water. Elders claim the moaning of the ocean is the sound of the spirits that guard the ship and its stolen goods. Many believe that buried treasure can also be found on Pomquet Island, which is just east from Malignant Cove. It's believed the ship is most commonly seen between September and November. I've never been a sailor. I've only been on a sailing boat one time, the Snoopy, and I found out I really don't like deep water, especially at night, way out in the middle of the water where you can't see any lights from shore. I know you have to try new things from time to time, but it's a real hassle when you try something like sailing and discover that you think you just might die from a mutant shark attack or a giant squid, or more than likely just simply from fear. You know you won't be going back to port for several hours, and it just makes everything that much worse. I don't recognize ships by their size or shape. I can usually identify an aircraft carrier if I look at it for a long time, usually. There are barks and brigs and brigantines and sloops and schooners, all different kinds of sailing ships based on their mast configuration, how the sails are set, how narrow or wide the thing is. They have sails, and that's all I can say about them. The difference between a boat and a ship is a ship has a boat on it. Well, that's what I was told anyway. October 7th, 1859, the steamship Fairy Queen was en route to Charlottetown on Prince Edward Island. Early in the morning, before the ship was scheduled to arrive, the town folks heard the bell and the church begin to ring. A constant ringing of a church bell at night meant there was trouble. People would congregate to find out what was happening and what they needed to do about it. The bell of the St. James Church rang 8 times and then stopped. Those close to the church arrived ready for an emergency. As they stood there in the street, the men saw the doors of the church were open. Stepping inside, the men saw 3 women, all dressed in white, standing near the altar. As they stood there staring at these 3 women, the church doors suddenly slammed shut. Startled, the men looked to see who had closed the doors with such force. No one was there, and when they looked back at the altar, the women were all gone as well. They talked about how odd it was that the bell had rang 8 times and how the 3 women had just vanished. That morning, the townsfolk found out that the Fairy Queen had sunk, killing 8 passengers. 3 of the dead were women from the St. James Church. Today, these women are known as the Phantom Bell Ringers of Prince Edward Island, and they have their own stamp. The next story is not a schooner, nor is it on fire. It does take place in the general location of the others, and with some regularity. Back in February 20th, 1932, a train was traveling through Canada west of Prince Edward Island. It had been snowing for weeks, and the tracks were under snow along a stretch called the Handrahan Crossing. The train was unable to push through the snowdrift, and it came to a stop. The train crew got busy with shovels trying to clear the tracks so the train could continue on to the next town. The conductor sent a couple of men down the line in order to watch for any trains that might be coming up along behind them. The snow kept falling back into the trench because of the wind, and the train men had dug twice as long as they should have been necessary. By 1:30 in the morning, thinking the train must be clear by now, the men sent out to watch for the next train started back to their caboose. As they were getting close to their rail car, the men heard the sound of a second train coming along the tracks behind them. The men began waving their arms and yelling, but the following train had built up speed in order to try forcing its way through the suspected snowdrifts. The area had a reputation for this. The fast-moving train plowed into the rear of the stuck train. It split the train cars in half as it slowly came to a halt. 4 passengers were killed and 1 was seriously injured. The engineer of the second train was killed on impact. Shortly after the crash, the train line was discontinued and the tracks were removed to be used elsewhere. For years after the tracks were removed, people would hear the sound of a train approaching along the empty railbed. They say they can hear the engine chugging out steam as well as the wheels clacking along the tracks. For those of you that don't know, that clacking sound is caused by the joints between the rails. As the train wheels go from one rail to the next, there's a small gap that just wide enough that it causes the sound. On rare occasions, people have seen a light moving along the tracks. The light looks just like the headlight from an old locomotive. It moves as if the engine has been putting on steam in order to push through something. It is going about as fast as an old locomotive could move. Some of those old steam trains could go about 120 miles an hour, so the light is really moving. Prince Edward Island is called PEI for short. It's the smallest Canadian province, coming in at 3,533 square miles. It could fit into Canada's second smallest province, Nova Scotia, about 9.5 times. It's not just the size that makes PEI small, it's the population as well. There are only 146,000 people living on the main island and 231 minor islands that make up the province. To kind of put it into perspective, Webb County, where I live, is 3,376 square miles, just a little bit smaller. Yet, we have a population of 276,000, which is nearly twice as many as PEI. A PEI is one of the three maritime provinces in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and is separated from the other two provinces, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, by the 140-mile-long, 13 to 50-mile-wide Northumberland Strait. The main island is known for farmland. PEI produces 25% of Canada's potatoes. They also have 63 lighthouses on the island. The Micmac people warned the first Europeans who came to PEI of a gigantic snake that swam around the water offshore of the Big Island. It didn't take long for the settlers to encounter this serpent. They said it looked like a 70-foot-long, tube-like monster with short reddish-brown fur and the head of a horse. Its body was made of humps that rose and fell in the water as it moved. Two of the local men were fishing from a boat near the West Point Lighthouse in 1980. As they sat there waiting for a nibble, they saw a 60 to 70-foot-long serpent approaching them. The creature raised its horse-like head from the water, stared at them briefly, and then swam away. The two men told the story often, and unlike tall tales, the story never changed. That's how you can usually pick up on a made-up story. The details change as the story gets told over and over. The teller wants to enhance the story and make the creep factor much more entertaining. They'll add more and more detail each time. An article from the Island Press Limited newspaper said that 9 people reported seeing the creature between July and August 1992. This creature is seen most often, is that even a word? The creature is seen most often in the months preceding the fire ship making its visits in September through November. One of the most recent sightings of the monster was in 2002 when Allison Ellis, his grandsons, and great-grandson were riding their ATVs along the beach at West Cape when something rose out of the water. It was a calm day and the water was flat. There were hardly any waves or breaks in the surface. Allison said there were no ripples in the water. Just outside the bar, there was a head sticking up out of the water, about 2 feet or so. The bar is a sandy area sticking up out of the water, kind of like a small island. It's not a place where you go to get a drink. They watched the sea monster swim out to sea, creating a wake like that of a small boat. The 3 were stunned by what they had seen. It took them a while to realize that they had seen the PEI sea monster. 2003, a lobster fisherman reported his encounter near the lighthouse at Point Acony, Nova Scotia. Wallace Cartwright saw what he thought was a log floating in the water right up until one end of the log rose from the water. The floating log now had a head. Cartwright said it looked to me like it was a brown animal. It had a head, something shaped like a sea turtle, and it had a body on it like a snake. The girth of the body would be something like about the size of a 5-gallon bucket. That would be about 10 to 12 inches. The brownish snake-like creature was about 25 feet long. It eventually dipped back into the water and disappeared. If I were into sailing and I ran into something like this, I would never set foot in a boat again. Not that I think I ever will anyway. About 40% of the people living in PEI are of Scottish descent. As their ancestors were settling in the area, they kept some of their legends and stories from the past alive. One of these stories is of the slough. In Irish and Scottish folklore, the slough were the spirits of restless dead. Sometimes they were seen as sinners or generally evil people who were neither welcomed in heaven nor hell, nor in the other world. These people had also been rejected by the Celtic deities as well as the earth itself. Whichever of the underlying beliefs, they're almost always depicted as troublesome and destructive. They were seen to fly in groups like a flock of birds, coming from the west, and they were known to try to enter a house of a dying person in order to carry their soul away with them. West-facing windows were sometimes kept closed to keep them out. Some consider the slough to also carry with them the souls of innocent people who were kidnapped by these destructive spirits. In PEI, there are folks that believe the slough is a large flock of black birds that can carry away unsuspecting people. To make this flock more ominous, each bird was the spirit of a sinner or an evil person. The flock could pluck people from their homes at night if the windows were left open, or if the person was out walking alone in the dark. Some victims of the slough never returned, but others did. These would wake, finding themselves in the woods, miles from home, with no idea on how they got there. Many such encounters were near the town of Bayfield, in a swampy area the demon birds were said to inhabit. Although there are few modern encounters, some long-time area residents remember stories of locals being carried away by the slough. The Scots not only brought with them stories of the slough, they also brought stories of fairies. Fairies of folklore were vicious, vindictive, and cruel, embodying forces of nature, lesser deities, or even the spirits of the dead, and they often appeared as monstrous figures, not the winged pixie-like beings that most people associate as being fairies today. Nothing that Disney would have ever represented. Fairies of folklore were blamed for all manner of mischief and ill, ranging from petty vandalism and theft to outright murder and kidnapping. They would frequently be blamed for causing livestock to grow sick or die. They would lead travelers astray at night or lure men to their doom near ponds and rivers. If sufficiently angered, they would even kill people. If you just happen to encounter a fairy, refuse to drink or eat anything they give you. If you partake of any kind of nourishment from the fairies, you'll become their slave for the rest of your life. The Micmac people had legends of little people. The Wiklatmuj, Wiklatmu-J. They lived in the area around Prince Edward Island. These small beings taught the Indians how to build things like wigwams and canoes. As payment for their teachings, any time a member of the tribe passed by where the little people lived, he had to leave a gift as tribute for their help. If they failed to leave a gift or the gift wasn't considered appropriate, the little people would cause a storm to come up or other kinds of disasters. There would be a storm, maybe a flood, a fire, something. This was all blamed on the little people of the forest. A tree on Ferry Hill in Gawambra, Prince Edward Island, was thought to be the home of the fairies on the island. People that visited Fairy Hill were warned to be careful. These fairies were vindictive and evil beings. Fairies weren't just limited to Fairy Hill. They lived in the woods on PEI. Their lilting voices and laughter, often heard when nobody else was around, they would lure people to their doom. They were also known to torment families in the area, sometimes beckoning children to wander off into the night. Some of these kids were never seen again. The few that they did find would tell stories of hearing voices calling them to follow them into the woods. They said the voices sounded rather pleasant until the child became lost. Then the creatures got a lot nastier. When a fairy grew too old to take care of themselves, the others would switch the old fairy for a newborn child. This way the humans would take care of the elder that was now known as a changeling. The old fairy looked just like the child, but it would continue growing older and eventually die. Meanwhile, the human child would be raised as a slave working for the fairy tribe. There's a story of a young family named Kelly who had a normal baby boy. One day Mrs. Kelly went to help her husband in the fields, leaving the boy in his crib. When they returned, the once healthy, robust baby looked pale and sickly. The baby did grow, but he never regained its health. The neighbors began calling the child Kelly's fairy. They were convinced it was a changeling. The boy grew up. He would have bouts of bad behavior, often angry and violent, which did little to dispel the rumors. When the boy died at 19, the townsfolk buried him in the middle of the night, under the cover of darkness. Prince Edward Island might also be home to Bigfoot or some other cryptid that lurks in the woods. A film crew was shooting a short movie on the island in 2005. As some of the cast were being filmed running through a wooded area, something can be seen in the trees behind them. It starts out it's down on all fours, but it stands up on two legs as the actors run by. It then turns and walks back into the woods on two legs. There are no bears on the island. The biggest animal on the island are coyotes. Now, bears can swim, but the odds of a bear swimming 13 miles from New Brunswick to Prince Edward Island are nil. Black bears swim maybe 2 miles, and that's it. Polar bears have been known to swim for up to 30 miles, but nobody is going to mistake a polar bear for a Bigfoot, and there are no polar bears anywhere near the area. All the polar bears in the area live in northern Quebec, but they don't wander that far south. It gets too warm. The Green Hill Provincial Park is just a short ways from the coast of Nova Scotia. The story of the Green Hill creature tell of a Bigfoot-like monster that lives in the area. In 2003, Miles McKinney and some of his teammates were training for their high school cross-country track team. Stephen McKenzie, Miles' dad, was the track team coach. He drove the boys to Green Hill Park so they could put in a few miles running through the woods. The boys took off running through the trees, following the trails. As they tromped along, the boys began to take note of how quiet it was. There were no birds or other creatures making a stir. Anyone who has spent time in the forest knows it's never quiet, unless something is wrong. The boys continued running, looking around them as they went, wondering what might be hiding in the trees that could cause all the animals to take cover. There was a superhuman scream ripped through the air. It was so loud the boys said they could feel it vibrating their bodies. The boys all turned and ran back the way they had come, heading for the van, hoping to get away from whatever was making such a sound. As they ran, they became aware of something running through the trees close behind them. The faster they ran, the faster their pursuer came. It wasn't following the trail, but it was crashing through the underbrush and the trees, smashing things out of its way. Everyone managed to reach the van unhindered. The creature stopped chasing them at some point, but none of them could say for sure when it had dropped off its pursuit or where it was the last time they'd heard it. "It scared us half to death," Miles told the press. None of them ever got a look at the beast, but they all came to the same conclusion. This was the Green Hill creature they had all heard about. For years, the story of this Sasquatch-like creature has been told around the park. Nothing would be reported for years, and then the creature would be heard once more crashing through the woods and screaming like a demon. The first report of this thing might have been August 5th, 1913, accounts from the Thorburn Post. It told of witnesses reporting a creature seen drinking milk from their cattle and stealing chickens. The creature left behind 15-inch footprints. No one found any footprints in Green Hill Park that day. Whether or not the authorities took their story seriously or not, there should have been an investigation as to what was chasing young boys through the park. I like Canada. I have a few friends living up there in the Great White North. John Kirk lives up there. He's a Mountie and a Bigfoot investigator. Scott David lives up there as well. He's a writer and a Bigfoot researcher. I'd go up there and look around, but they won't let me carry any weapons, and so I'll wait. I ask folks all the time, why do they get vaccines? They say it's for their protection. So I'll ask them, well, what kind of a handgun do you carry? They'll just give me a blank look. I guess their idea of protection and mine are somewhat different. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, let your friends know what they're missing. If you have to, play it up a bit. Maybe they'll listen and discover they like it. If you have a subject you'd like to hear more about, you can contact me at strangethings@arkanasa.com. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murdered 3? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.